Beautiful day. Welcome to our Core Facilities Seminar Series. Today we will be featuring the centralized UMass Core Facilities new administrative management tool, CORUM. For those of you who do not know me, I am Lisa Korpieski, the Director of Communications and Marketing here at the Institute for Applied Life Sciences. In today's seminar, you will be hearing from Andrew Vinard, the Director of the UMass Amherst Core Facilities, as well as our Systems Administrator, Bob Stevens. We are hoping that with these bi-weekly seminars, you will discover what great resources that the centralized UMass Amherst Core Facilities offer to our campus community, the New England region, and beyond. Next, just a few housekeeping items. As you heard, the seminar is being recorded. If you miss any part of this seminar or would like to forward it to someone who could not attend, there will be a replay of this and all previous seminars in this series on our website. I will put a link in the chat. I recommend you set your view mode to speaker. Please stay muted during the talks. In order to handle all of your questions during the Q&A, we're going to save them till the end of the presentation. During that time, please use the raised hand feature. I will call on you, unmute yourself, and ask your question. I also encourage you to put all questions into the chat. This way we can have a record of them and they can be added to the FAQ page if they're not already there. If you have a question that cannot wait, please put it in the chat and I will monitor it and read it for you. Thank you. So now I would like to introduce you to Andrew Vinard, the Director of our centralized UMass Amherst Core Facilities. Andrew.
Thank you, Lisa. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Quorum overview. As Lisa mentioned, my name is Andrew Vinard, and I'm the Director of the centralized Core Facilities here at UMass Amherst. Before we get into Quorum, I would like to announce for those not already aware, and as Lisa mentioned, that this time slot, every other Tuesday at 2 o'clock, is reserved for our recently started Core Seminar Series. The goal of the series is to both educate our research community about the capabilities we have and to hear from partners and experts who use our cores and appreciate the importance of these resources. Our past seminars have included computational modeling, light microscopy, and AdFab, and coming up soon will be animal imaging and mass spec. You can see all past seminars and information about upcoming seminars on our website that Lisa will put a link to in the chat soon. Before I get too far, I'd also like to make sure I give as much praise as possible to Bob Stevens, IELTS Systems Administrator, who has done just an incalculable amount of work making sure that this system, Quorum, has got where it is right now. Additionally, we've had our key partners at UMass IT, led by Steve Battisti, who helped us with connections to the UMass Central Integrations, and our primary partner, TableXI, who are the main developers for the system, for the other institutions using it as well, including Northwestern and Dartmouth. I'd be remiss to not give thanks to the core directors who have been incredibly patient with me in every aspect of developing this system and getting it implemented, but they've also been quick to point out feedback and give tips on things that are working well. So I'm very grateful for their involvement in making sure the system works for us all. Last but certainly not least, I want to make sure I give thanks to A&F and the VCRE main offices who saw the value in a system like this and actually gave some fiscal support to make sure it got up and running. So we are truly grateful for the amount of people who have had their hands in support and making sure the system gets there, and we're happy to show it to you today. Though it is in its infancy, so I hope you will be willing to give some feedback as we go as well. So without further ado, we're going to talk today about Quorum, the core online resource manager at UMass. For those new to UMass and who maybe came from other institutions, you may be more familiar with some commercial solutions that are out there. But here at UMass, when I joined about 4 years ago, we had FOM, and we are still utilizing FOM, but saw some vulnerabilities in the system and saw some gaps that just weren't really able to be the full service system that we had hoped to have. So we went down a path of seeing what would be best for us and settled on this solution, Quorum, that is built off the backbone of a new core that came out of Northwestern. So we're grateful to have partners at Northwestern to show us how they've done these things. And with over 60 cores on their system, we're confident that we know the system can work in the ways we need it to. So first and most importantly, I'll just go over what we're going to cover today. At a pretty high level, this is intended to be just a first glimpse for those who haven't had any access to the system yet. And really the most important part is number 6 down there, getting to the Q&A. So I'll tell you a little bit about the background of the system, go over some user how-tos, some aspects of business managers, involvement in the system and what they have responsibilities for and access to, some things we hope to develop as we get further along in this process and program, how to get help if and when you need it, and then again, most importantly, getting to your questions so we can hopefully have some real-time answers for you. So what is Quorum at the highest level? Quorum is a transaction processing system for core facilities here at UMass. If you dig a little bit deeper, what does that actually mean? Well, We intend for this to be the one place where you can go for billing and invoicing for all of our core facilities, which means that not only will you be able to reserve time, which is critical importance too, but also you'll be able to get a bill in this one system. So you only have one place to go for all of your core facility access. It's also a search engine, meaning if you have interest in a specific tool and you're not sure where it might be, there's a nice little search bar up top that we just checked the other day, and it has a lot more in there than I even realized already. So if you're looking for a specific tool, it's a quick way for you to go find what facility may contain that tool. Also important is its ability to generate reports, and this is for the individual PIs who want to get a grasp of what's happening within their facilities, all the way up to senior management who might want to know what's happening across the core portfolio. So having, again, a one-stop shop for all of these aspects is really important to have a tool that can do all of those things. Right out there in the bottom is a project management system. Though Quorum is capable of being a project management system, that might be a little bit further down the line, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those aspects in there and how we'll be coming to them in future developments. So benefits, and not to read all of them, but the long and the short, I'll just hammer home that this is a one-stop shop. So no longer do you have to go to FOM for one core's access and maybe Google Calendar for another, or just go in and sign on at the front desk for a third core. This is a way for you to go to any of our core facilities and make sure you have access to get reservations, that those reservations are approved, and again, that the proper accounts are billed at the back end. To make that a functional system, to me, the most important aspect was making sure we were connected to the UMass systems. So this was not a standalone tool that would have to then be pumped out into these other systems. But most important was making sure that they connect to existing systems. So to hammer home where we focused was Active Directory. So no longer do you have to have a different password and account for this that you may forget. You use your same UMass logon that you would for any other system. Likewise, PeopleSoft, we're directly connected into that system at this point. So when we're talking about billing and use of speed types, you're not allowed to put wrong speed types in there anymore, so it saves some billing headaches, we'll say, at the back end. And last but not least is connection to OWL. So if you do any trainings here at UMass, you have to get them certified, or at least the HNS trainings, through OWL. And the system is able to check OWL to make sure that the certifications you have that are required to be using certain facilities, we can check there automatically instead of having to lose some time doing that. Additionally, because the folks that manage OWL have been very helpful and very engaged with us in the cores, we're able to put core trainings into OWL to be tracked. So that will make it easier for the core directors to make sure that those of you who need specific trainings in facilities will be able to get those, and they'll be tracked in a central location. Who is this system for? Just about everybody, from internal to externals, for my core directors, for the core directors across UMass. It's an ability to be able to track their services and resources in, again, a streamlined manner. To be able to create user accounts for the users if they need to, and to be having confidence that those accounts are created with real data behind them. For the PIs, to make sure that those people who are supposed to be using an account have access and nobody else, and those accounts are being used on the right projects. For the individual users, now you can go on, log on, make sure you're using a speed type that is actually validated by your PI that you have access to. For account managers, departmental managers, to make sure that the payments that are being used are intentionally used. To create new user accounts as well. For PIs who have new students to come on and off all the time, you're able to go in and make sure that the right people have access to the system. And most importantly, again, is to manage the payment sources writ large. So not only are you able to put the right speed types in the account, but if somebody uses some service and after the fact realizes they should have been on a different speed type, we can change it in the system before it goes out for a billing event. So there are a lot of aspects to this system that will automate the billing processes that we've had so far and should make it easier moving forward. And I list the administrators there because that's my wheelhouse. That's where this system is important to me. And though monitoring and reporting may seem like a small issue to some folks, for me, one of the things that keeps me awake every night is making sure that everybody knows about these core facilities and how important they are. And unfortunately, right now at the university, the majority of the tools we have to show utilization are fiscally based, not about how many users and what type of users and which departments and how many students were trained in a given time period. And once we get a little bit further along in the system being used, I'll be able to give those reports in real time, which will just show the university community how important these systems and tools and resources are to everybody to continue the investment that the institution has been willing to give us. So a little high level on all of those aspects. And with that, I will punt it over to Bob Stevens, who's going to walk you through a few different aspects of how to use the system. Go ahead, Bob.
Hello, everyone. I'm Bob Stevens, System Administrator for IELTS. I'm going to go over a few key aspects of the quorum system for users as well as for managing payment sources. In order to use quorum, Every user is going to have have a quorum account. To request an account, complete the user authorization form on the ILS website. This form will send an email notification to the quorum admins, the facility directors, and the PI. Once the account has been created, you'll receive an email notification in a few days. After the account has been created, you may log into Quorum using your UMass NetID and password. So once you have your Quorum account, you can use it to reserve time on instruments, as well as place orders through the facility. On the Quorum homepage, you can browse through the two-level hierarchy of the core facilities and instruments, or use the search feature to find the product you'd like to purchase. Once you find the product you'd like to purchase, you can select your payment source from your list of allowed payment sources. You can also view the reservation calendar and enter a reservation time period that you'd like to use the instrument. All your reservations will show up on your My Reservations tab on Quorum. From here, there's several useful operations. You can move your reservation. You can edit the time and duration. You can start and stop the reservation for equipment that has equipment interlocks, or you can cancel the reservation. There's another option that you can use to report an issue to the core facility staff if you have a problem with your reservation or you have a problem with the equipment. You must be trained and authorized to use most equipment. If you try to reserve time on an instrument that you're not authorized to use, you'll be prompted to contact the core staff. The business admins in Quorum manages all the payment sources used, as well as the orders that are placed using those payment sources. The business admins are concerned with one tab called the My Payment Sources tab on the Quorum top navigation. This tab has links to the management tools for your payment sources and all the transactions related to those payment sources. You'll also be able to add new speed types to Quorum by having your PI complete the PI authorization form. You may also see credit card and PO purchase order payment sources that have been added by other people in the system. Every payment source has a member list. That's the list of authorized users who can use the speed type in Quorum to place orders and make reservations. The business admins in Quorum can add and remove users from the authorized user list on every payment source that they own or manage. The transaction history section allows you to view details of all the transactions related to your payment sources. There's several filtering options and search options that are available to assist you in management of these transactions. The last tab is transactions in review. The account owners will be notified by email when transactions are available for review. The account owner has 7 days to adjust the payment sources or dispute the charges. All reviewed orders will be submitted for payment through PeopleSoft, internal orders. The order detail pages have options to change the payment source or dispute the charges with a note field for a reason for the dispute. And that's what I have.
Thank you, Bob. So we just wanted to, again, go very high level with some of the very basics. And I know we went through those quickly, so we'll probably have some questions and we can jump back to any of those specific slides. But before we do, I just clearly love to talk. So I wanted to go a few more steps about the system as a whole and to say about where it came from and where we are and where we're going. And then again, where you can get some help and then jump back to that Q&A time. So when we rolled out this system about 2 years ago, and I won't go to the full history of when we started trying to acquire a system, this was our projected timeline. Pretty aggressive in getting from nothing to a fully built system for all cores in about 2 years. But first and most important, again, is going back to building those central integrations. I've been involved with some other systems that built out for the cores and then did those central integrations after the fact. And let's just say it didn't go well. So that was my driver, is to make sure we had PeopleSoft, Active Directory, and all connections before anybody used the system. And then we intended to go a little bit slowly, go 2 cores built out, make sure things functional, increase the cores that were on the system as we were able to address issues, so that by the time we were at that July of 2021 timeframe, we knew all the bugs and had all the kinks worked out. But then reality happened, and we had a little bit of a ramp up, and forget the color codes here, but this was intended to keep track of when things were going at a normal pace is how we were tracking. And we stayed pretty true to our initial timeline and got those kickoffs done and production shell system up there before the end of 2019. And you see that little yellow box about getting 2 cores in the system and the timeline around about when that happened. And as many of you are aware, things at the institution and world changed a little bit. So we kind of had to take a pause and reflect on where things were and how things were going. What I am very happy to say is now at this point where we are today, we were expected to only have about 14 cores online, and that was with everything going well. When we had that pause around March, I was really worried that we'd fall behind and maybe have to add in some extra timeline to the end of this project. But in reality, what happened, and this is largely to do with Bob's just taking this on his back and moving forward and getting cores up and running, is we already have 24 cores running where we should only have about 14. We have, as of counting this morning, over 480 users signed up, and there's some internal and external users on there. A lot of the business managers are on there. And most importantly, this would be if there were a time to break champagne, we had our first billing event done the week before last. So this is not only just a system that has some connections behind it, but it's actually being used as intended ahead of schedule. So I could not be any more proud of where we are and where I see the future going. Because now, even though we're ahead of schedule, we still have quite a lot to do. And I'm pretty confident with all the work that's being done that we'll have all cores online and hopefully just continue full use. We may still have some legacy use where we're bridging over, but full and daily use of FOM by the end of this calendar year. So just a short time frame from now. There are quite a lot of developments that we still need to get through and will as we go. But just seeing where we are right now versus where we were supposed to be and knowing the history of the system, I hope you all can appreciate that there's been a lot of work done here. And hopefully in the near future, you all are appreciative of the work that's here and what we're able to do. I should comment too that it says the first manual billing event, because this is a system that is intended to be hands-off. Right now, if you've had the pleasure of interfacing with the accountants, they do all of our billing, and that's for any of the facilities. They may have 10 users, so those that have 300 users in a given month, they manually have to bill and do all of the journaling for all of that. Once we can validate that the manual billing process works, we're going to be able to put that all automated. So essentially the billing processes that Bob showed of you requesting service completion, going into a queue to be reviewed, and then finalized, that will all be automated. And once it hits that last trigger, it'll automatically go to the financial transaction system. So we'll have a truly automated financial system for all users. And I'm pretty confident we'll be there in the next few months. So what happens next? Technically, we are in phase 2 of quorum build out. Phase 1, again, was just building to the university connections and getting a few cores online. Because of the way things work, we were able to ramp up and get quite a few more cores online. And so we still have quite a bit to address. And this is a lot of the things we've talked about. This does not include many of the things that have been requested, so please don't consider this an exhaustive list. But there are a few things going back to the first conversations we had with business administrators about how can we make this more effective. And that's making sure that you have to actually go in and approve charges versus it being automated. Some grants like Hatch accounts and some others, there needs to be a manual step in the middle to be able to approve accounts. So we want to make sure we build that in automation versus tripping some flags that we didn't intend to. We intend to integrate forms with the system. So for those cores that are creating quotes for you, or for those cores that may have more complicated service processes, having a form to do that in the system versus having to do a PDF form that then you send and attach will make processes a little bit easier. We also want to make sure so we get to a point where individuals can sign themselves up. You can go into the system, put their net ID, put their speed type, and be good to go, or at least be acknowledged. Versus right now, all those forms Bob showed you, you have to fill out. We're responsible, and quite honestly, Bob and some of the core directors have done the majority of entry for users on the system right now. So getting to a point of automating that as we continue to grow will be really important. We want to be able to remove users if they're not actively engaged with the system or if they've left the university, so that we don't have errant billing or we don't have things engaged, people engaged with processes that don't need to be. And quite honestly, just to clean the backlog of users in the system, make sure it stays clean is important. Integration of door card readers. This might be more pertinent for those who are using things like our clean rooms, where you basically are charged for the time you used within the facility, or the cell culture lab. So Northwestern has already implemented this, and that basically means that you walk up and you swipe your card at the door. It validates your trainings, it validates your EH&S obligated trainings, and also the lab trainings, lets you in and starts your clock when you're there. So we've talked about whether we can implement that here at UMass, and whether we could also think about doing that at the localized machines. So if you walk up to an instrument, it's time to use, could you swipe your card to be able to get access? Generation of quotes, again, that goes back to the form, and that's a lot more pertinent sometimes for our external users, but there are some cases internally where you're submitting a grant and you'd like to know what the full scope might be, and if we can get the system in a good place, we might be able to do that internally. For those human subject scores, there's been conversations about connections to IRB. This would never take the place and never have any intent to do any of the processes that are in IRB, but maybe there's a way for us to interface with the IRB for those who are using human subjects to at least validate that it is an active protocol before you are able to make service reservations. Some of these bottom three are more kind of aspirational goals for me. We do have quite a few users from across campus and outside, and we'd like to be able to integrate across the PeopleSoft system throughout UMass, so that if you're coming from Lowell or Worcester or Dartmouth, you're able to actually use the system without having to log out or be treated as an external user. Likewise, I would love to get to a point where there's other resources on campus that aren't considered centralized cores. And if they find the system valuable, there's no reason they can expand, so that you as users on campus would again have a one-stop shop for being able to get any services you need here. And then my biggest aspirational goal is, if this works well, we'll be able to expand to the other campuses. So again, you as users would be able to look at what Lowell or Worcester or one of the other campuses has, and if we don't have it here, or there's for some reason to go somewhere else, we're all talking about being within the same system instead of having to track with what they use. And because of the connections to PeopleSoft, it should make billing and those other processes more streamlined. So that's just, again, a high level of what we hope to have addressed in the future. We know that as we go, we're going to be getting a lot more requests. And again, this is not exhaustive. I do have quite a few from the core directors, from the core staff, and from other folks we've worked with. And our goal is to make sure we focus on those that have the biggest value first, and make sure that if it's going to be really foundational to all users in the system, let's put our effort and energy towards making those system changes go first, and then see what we can do downstream to make it marginally better as funds and time are available. So I'll say that as you're using this, right, this is barely rolled out. We'll consider this really kind of the grand unveiling of the sorts. So those folks who just jumped right in and are starting to use this, there's going to be a lot of questions you have, whether it be how do you do a specific process? How do you get something that isn't working to work? And what do you do if there is a feature you'd like to see and it wasn't in that list, or you're not sure if it's something that we'd like to have in the system? Well, for the first two, Bob has spent a significant amount of time making sure that we have a robust documentation portal there and available. So you can see that web address there, and on the right is just a screenshot of some of the things that are there. So how do you access it as a user? You fill out the form. And that FAQs that's there, it looks like just one highlighted button there, but there's a significant amount of information in those FAQs. I can't register. Who do I talk to? Where do I log in? How do I add my speed type? A whole bunch of different things that you might want to know how to do and you're not sure. There's a lot of documentation here. But I don't want you thinking you're alone in this system. If as you go, you see questions and you're not sure how to address them, we're available. Our email addresses are throughout the website, and they'll be on the last slide I show in a second. So if you ever have questions, you're welcome to reach out to us. But because this is built off IT systems, we have a service desk that you'll be able to send questions in, and they'll get response. So it is just a general IT@umass.edu address. But if you put quorum in the subject line, it should get flagged. And Bob and Andrew Scott, who I reluctantly left out of my thank yous, who is the IELTS IT lead, also have access to that ServiceNow queue. So again, whether it be you don't have the ability to get a user into the system, or there's a feature build you like, or you notice something is broken, if you send it to IT@umass.edu, it'll be tracked and we'll be able to follow up and make sure you get resolution. So with that and my constant babbling, I'll leave it on this slide to again make sure that you have our contact information if you have any questions that we don't get to today. But then also, I just really want to emphasize that FAQ/tutorials page has a significant amount of information in there. And that does not mean that you should be alone and only using that page to get your answers, but there's a lot of content, so it might be a good spot to start. And then again, the IT@umass.edu knows about quorum and is in there. So if you have questions that we're not able to get to, you can put it in there. It will be tracked in a queue. So with that, I'll thank you all for your attention and apologize for going at rapid pace, but that gives us about a half hour to get to Q&A. So I think Lisa's going to moderate, so I'll stop talking and see if we have any questions yet.
Yes, we have one in the chat. It says, is the information I already submitted already inserted in quorum?
I suppose I would have to know what that information is. Let me see if I can find the chat. So if the person who asked that question, could you be more specific about the information you submitted?
It's Anna Maria.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I was referring to the forms that I've been submitting to each facility that we use in the lab with speed type information. So if that information has to be sent anew, or you're going to be bringing it into the system from what you already have?
It's in the system already. So if you've been filling out those forms over the last couple of weeks, those are already in the system. So we have 480 users that have been entered as of, again, just a couple hours ago. And that's all based on the information you shared.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, and Dave Follett has a question.
Yes, I do. Can you hear me?
You
Yes.
can.
Okay, good. Yeah, quickly, I think I have a lot of questions, so I may come back, but I just wanted to reiterate that I've only been using it for a week or so, and it's way more effective than I even hoped it would be, which I think is great. I think the FAQ is, I'll say surprisingly useful, because most FAQ is not that useful, but this is actually a great resource. And it's reduced the number of questions I've asked Bob. I still have lots of questions. But my first question is, with users, is the idea that, say, if you have one PI, they have multiple users under them, so then you're billing lots of individuals, and then they can share a speed type, or should it be that one PI kind of has one user and then everyone just kind of orders under one account? What's the thinking there?
I think the format, I'll start by saying, for those who don't know Dave is one of the core directors. So again, to hear the kind words he's saying about the system, that's really important for me. But to go to the users, and this is important for everybody that's listening, and Bob corrected me last week when I went off course saying this, so if I go wrong again, Bob, please do correct me. Essentially, Dave and everybody, the PI has responsibility for the speed types, and multiple users could have access to those. So we'll say you have a speed type, there could be a dozen people on there, but it's all validated by the PI who is the owner of that speed type. So if you're a user, you may have 6 or 7 speed types that your PI owns, and you'll have access to all of those that the PI authorizes you to have access to.
Okay. We have another question from, I think it's Carol Green. Carol, want to unmute yourself and ask?
Hi, I also want to say I really love the system. I did have a question though, when I was looking at the funding sources listed under each of the students. I didn't see an option to switch an expense to the IELTS core credits. So I'm wondering if that will be taken care of, if that will be automatically added to each user's list of speed types to use, or how is that going to work?
Good question, great question. And the short answer, and for those who may not be familiar with the core credits, if you're an IELTS member, every dollar that you spend in grant funding, you get 1.5% back to use specifically in the core facilities. So that's the core credits that are being discussed now. Right now, that is wholly managed internally to IELTS, meaning that only IELTS administrators have access to the speed type to be able to charge against. Because we have, I think, over 260 IELTS faculty members at this point. Rather than, I may have butchered that number, sorry, but let's just say 260 as a starting point. Rather than creating individually 260 speed types to then give out to the core, to the faculty, we've kept it internal for now. So the way that would work, Carol, is that if you know that your PI or the student knows the PI or the PI themselves knows they'd like to use a core credit, at this point it'll happen after the fact. So a PI or again user accesses the facility, they are billed on speed type 1. You'll get notified that a billing event is due or a charge is due, and you can dispute and say, we'd like to apply our core credit at this point, and the core accountants can come in and apply the core credit at that time. So again, it's before it goes out to billing. You don't have to do a journal after the fact. It's before any charges hit your account. But as of now, until we can find a more eloquent way or more efficient way to manage the core credits, it's going to be at the time of billing, put your hand up and say, we'd like to use our core credit.
Okay, so we would have to dispute the charge and just write that we want to use the core credits.
As of now, correct. We talked about just automatically applying them, but again, because we don't have the speed types in anything but a singular account, we have to decide or figure out whether we want to create accounts for each of the investigators or continue under this way right now. So yes, dispute is the way it's going to work for right now.
Oh yeah, that sounds really easy. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. Anna Maria has a second question. Go ahead.
Lisa, I think it was answered. It's just that sometimes the same user in a certain lab is using the same facility for different applications, for different projects, and therefore different speed types. But I guess that's something I had to explore by just going to CORUM and walk around and see if I have any questions. I don't want to just repeat questions that might be in the Q&A already.
No, I think it's good to dig a little bit deeper and maybe try to expand further. And if I butcher it, I'll butcher it, and we'll keep working through there. But essentially, so say that there's a student in the lab that has access to 4 or 5 accounts for 4 or 5 different projects.
Correct.
Ideally, that student knows which project they're working on when they make a reservation, and they have the drop-down menu to pick from their speed type. There is some attributes to the speed type that I believe it says that at least the PI name. I don't think it has the project that the speed type is associated with at this point. But ideally, the student or the user knows which account they should be choosing for the specific project. But if they don't, the PI can do a reconciliation at the end of the month or at any given time and say who's used the speed type over the last time period and make adjustments to that point. Or again, the business administrators could say at the end of the month, why is student X using that account? They should be using this one and make a modification before the billing event happens.
Yeah, because the students are not necessarily going to remember. And remember that some of the speed types change over the 1 year, 1, 2, and 3. So, and they don't have it in mind. I don't expect them to do either.
I've been told repeatedly that that's something that I need to realize, that the students may not have as much information about the speed types as I think they should have. But again, there's the fact that it's built into PeopleSoft. If it's an expired speed type, they won't have access to it anymore. It won't be something they can make a reservation with. But after the fact, once the reservation has been made or service has been completed, there's a few checkpoints where they can adjust the speed type to what it should be.
No, what helps is if you consider that the student have to know it, then I will make sure that they do. And if that makes things easier, in advance, I think is taking full advantage of CORUM.
I think that would make it easier for everyone. But again, I'll be respectful of the fact that doesn't always work in practical application.
Thank you.
Karen Hackela had a similar question. Karen, did that get answered for you?
I don't think so.
Okay.
First, I want to thank people for doing all the work to put this together. I can see it's an enormous amount of work, but I think it's going to be really helpful. The question I had was for the actual authorization form by the PI, it seems like there's only 5 or 6 slots to authorize speed types. What if you want to add more than 5 or 6? How do you do that? Or
So
can you?
yes, you absolutely can. I don't know that there's a limit to how many speed types a PI could have in the system. That form that you're filling out is a legacy form that we used. This is probably an ignorance on my part that I didn't know how many speed types on average PIs would have. So we took a shot out of the gate to say 6 seems like a reasonable amount that most might have. So I would say, Karen, just fill it out again. It should be able to add additional speed types as you didn't get the first go around, and we'll just put those in when they come through. And maybe we can take for action a way to make it add as many as you need to. I just don't know how many is average for PIs to have in terms of number of speed types.
Okay, thank you.
Dave has another question. Go ahead, Dave.
So I hope the, is my video all green? Okay. Anyway, I hope my, this question isn't too specific, but for those who are doing external users doing vouchers, have we outlined the exact workflow for that? Because I've been practicing, I've created an invoice, the invoice is for the full amount, and it's like, that's not right, they don't want to get that. If this is the right time to answer that, that's great, we can answer it another time if you want also.
We'll, at the risk of guessing we don't have too many external users or voucher users on the call, Dave, we'll probably save that one for a core specific chat. We'll say we have the workflow kind of worked out, but I don't think we haven't done it just yet, so we don't know some of the pitfalls we might see. But if there are any external users online, what I'd like to say is that the system is intended to basically have 2 ways of payment. If you're a UMass user, you're going to use your speed type. If you're external, you're going to be able to put in there whether you have a purchase order or a credit card you'd like to bill or a check that you're going to be sending in. And similar to even the internal users, and this is maybe where we can tie it back to the broader audience, you have the ability to split bill, right? So for our voucher program, and for those who may not be familiar with it, different than the core credits, the voucher program is funding that the state has given external users from small and medium-sized companies to use our cores. It's quite substantial. If you want to know more, I can probably talk for another couple hours about that alone. But essentially what we're going to do, Dave, is split bill at that point. So they'll say that they're a user of your facility. They'll get charged the portion that they owe, and we'll charge an account for the essentially the voucher speed type. Same thing for the internal users, right? If you do have a PI who, for whatever reason, would want to use multiple accounts, I believe you have the ability at the outset to say split it among these. But if not, again, it's something you do after the billing, or rather before the billing event happens, but after the service has been rendered, you can say, let's use these 2 accounts. And that does tie back to the core credits. That's how we're going to approach it that way. In case it's maybe not enough core credit to cover the whole amount of the service, but a portion thereof, we can split bill.
Great. Mike Busa has a question.
Hi, Andrew. So one of the things that we have previously run into with billing is that oftentimes students or postdocs will chip in and help out on their non-primary PI's projects.
Yep.
And what I wanted to discuss is the billing that runs that. So in the FOM, the bills would go to their designated supervisor, which was a typed in field. Can you talk about how billing will happen based on speed type ownership now?
I think I can. I may butcher it, but let me try my best. Essentially, it's going to be whoever is responsible for the speed type will get the account. It won't be the user. So in your example, Mike, if somebody's stepping in to help with one PI that they typically wouldn't work for, hopefully they have access to that PI speed type versus their own PI speed type, and the PI they're doing the work for would then get the billing, if that makes sense. But what's key there, and what I don't know, and maybe Bob can clarify for me, is whether we can grant access to the users not from the PI's lab to a speed type they typically wouldn't belong to. If so, it's pretty straightforward. If not, hopefully that would be caught at the end of it. So let's say that the student is working under their PI and they check that PI speed type to make the reservation, but it really should be under somebody else's. Hopefully when their PI, and I've probably lost the thread a little bit now, but hopefully when their PI gets the bill, they recognize it as not something that would be from their project, and they can dispute it, and at that point we can move to the right speed type. But hopefully the solution is that they can have access to the PI they're working with speed type and just make the reservation on the right account.
That's it for questions so far. Does anybody else have any additional questions? You're welcome to just unmute yourself and ask.
I have another question that maybe it's already covered in your FAQs, but just in general, when we get an email saying that a review is needed, I get it as the business admin person for my lab, and my PI gets it, but I didn't see any place where I could approve something. I could see where I could change a speed type, but does the PI ultimately have to be the one to approve? How does that work?
I ran through it quickly earlier, Cal, but what I mentioned about the manual approval of charges.
Yeah, that's what I didn't quite catch.
At this point, that does not exist in the system. So right now it's dispute or let the 7-day period expire. And if that 7-day period expires, then it will go through. So if there's no dispute, basically you look at it, say it's good to go, and it just stays until that time period expires. So that will be hopefully a future development where you can say, I looked at it, I reviewed it, boom, and click a button and it's good to go to actually bill.
Okay, that sounds good. Thanks.
I have a question from Deborah Lee. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask it?
So how, as a business manager, can I see all the transaction history and oversee all the transactions for my department?
At the risk of pulling up the system live and showing you just how unfamiliar I am with it so far versus some of the other users, the long and short, Deborah, is that in the system there is a reporting feature where you can go click and add the different attributes. So you can do it by department, you can do it by PI, you can do it by speed type, and the different levels of review will allow you to see pending charges, complete charges, all aspects of the process. You'll be able to pull a report that shows you the different components to it. If you happen to have somebody responsibility for multiple departments, I believe you can even do just based on the department you want to see. So the short answer is there is a pretty good reporting feature. It's not, don't want to make it seem like it's what you might see in Summit where a lot of dashboard type features are pulled out. It's right now just basically a table listing of all of those charges that you want to narrow down to, and you can then export it to Excel or some other system if you want to do some feature manipulation or report viewing. I will say that I didn't put that as a future feature build, but that's one of my future feature builds is doing more robust reporting with graphics that we were able to include. So right now, the short answer is if you go into the reporting, you can pull any level of transaction history from things that have been submitted to those that have been completed to those that have been billed, and do all kinds of filtering to see if it's just by individual PI all the way up to all through the department.
And that's from the Quorum Business Managers page?
Correct. Well, anybody has access to that. Your level of authentication or your level of, I'm blanking on a word right now, authority gives you the access that you'll be able to see. So a PI, or rather, let's say a user, will have access to the speed types they have access to. A PI will have access to all the speed types and the people who use those speed types. A departmental manager or billing administrator will have access to all those accounts and those that they have responsibility for. So it's kind of a hierarchical thing. The more authority and more of a role you have in the system, the more you'll be able to see.
Very good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Dave has a question.
So thank you for entertaining all my questions. This is a question about external users, and I think about myself buying stuff from other people, and you buy something online, you're sent a bill. I think the concept of like review is a little bit strange when you're an external user. And we do actually send them a PDF invoice anyway, sort of at the end, or a statement. Is there a way to get rid of the review period for external, or at least not notify for reviews? Because I see that it's just like another email that you're like, oh, what am I supposed to do here? If you're not used to this sort of approval system.
I'm going to say I'll take that for action, Dave. I know that right now, because that review basically, I believe, goes with the statement, and on the statement, the users have the ability to pay by credit card. So even if we have a review period, I assume we're going to start getting people paying before the review period is over. So what we might do, again, is wait for what I mentioned to Carol's question, is if we're able to include a manual bill process, meaning I reviewed, it's good to go, bill me now. But let me not go too far afield and go down a bunch of different paths. I don't know if that's a fundamental change to the system. It's why we're looking at doing that manual approval of charges. I don't know if we could get rid of it altogether for certain customer types versus others.
Yeah, as I was practicing, I would just manually say, oh, approved, keep going. But we can work around it for now. That's great.
Just a reminder that the link to the FAQs is in the chat if you guys are interested in that. And if we have no more questions, which I don't see anymore, I just wanted to, if everybody has a minute, I'd like to take a quick poll to see if you're interested in weekly office hours addressing all of your questions on quorum. If you could take a minute to do that, that would be great.
And I'll go a little bit further while you're thinking about answering, or if you haven't already. The idea might be that we have standing office hours, and maybe we'll advertise versus the core seminar series, which I really want to make sure is highlighting the capabilities and expertise and great work being done in the cores. This may be at a separate time where we just have an open block, and this week we're doing user authentication, and next week we're doing certain aspects of the system, so you can kind of get more hands-on and time with it. But if nothing else, it'll just be an open hour block where we're here, Bob, myself, perhaps the folks from Table XI, and can be there to answer any detailed questions you might have.
Thank you, Andrew, for that. So far it looks like more people are very interested in office hours, so we'll have to arrange that for everyone. Okay, and I'll stop the polling on that. Okay, and I guess if there's no additional questions, then I guess we're finished.
So Carol, put another question in the chat. I just was able to see
right.
for a second.
All right, Carol, go right ahead.
Carol, I'll say that this presentation in all my clunky speech is going to be on the website in the very near future. The slide presentation as well. I know that's very high level and might not get them the in-depth knowledge they need about how to use the system. But hopefully as they get a chance to look at the FAQs, there should be a lot of the information there. And then when we pivot to the office hours, that'll be another opportunity for them to get help. But I'll also put the core directors on the spot right now. And I know specifically Steve Iles, who's on the call, has been working with the core directors quite a bit, rather the core users quite a bit, to show them what they need and how to get them familiar with it. Especially those who are using FOM right now. It's more of a transitionary period to say, okay, here's how you did it here, here's how you'll do it now. And as always, the core directors are the reason these things function and are so good. So in a short time frame, Carol, it might be the best to just reach out to the core director if they're having specific problems on the core they're using. But more generic, hopefully we'll be able to stand up these office hours in the next week or two and have them just kind of as a standing presentation about basic how-tos. So in short, we're going to have more information available in the near future. The system got a little bit further ahead than I expected to, so we'll have some maybe more formal and proper trainings. Consider this just a super high level awareness, and we'll work on making more tailored presentations about how to.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's great. I'll also pass along some of these links so that they'll have access to it. And so you're saying some of the cores are still FOM and some of them have already transitioned. So I'll just let them know that. And
they will hear from their core director. Essentially, a few have kind of transitioned over somewhat. Some want to rip the Band-Aid off and all go from one day to the other. But just because it's such a new system, they want to make sure that they don't lose access to good data or that things aren't calculating improperly. So there may be a short time period over the next couple of months where both systems are active, but FOM should be rapidly kind of shut down, as at least for the centralized cores, as quorum proves more and more useful.
all right. Well, thanks to all those core directors for helping our students. I appreciate it.
I second that.
Steve mentioned that he's going to be doing some brief instructional videos to show his students how to use the system.
Yeah, that was my goal. There were a few questions from some of my users as to how exactly to do things like start reservations and book time. So if I can get video recording to work properly, I'll do that. Or maybe I'll ask Lisa to help me because she's
Absolutely, would be happy to help you.
Thank you.
And Mike Busa, do you have another comment?
Yeah, I know that I see some of the users of the CH2PM here. We're making the switch over, and we're really rolling it out tomorrow after this call, so that everybody could see a little bit of what is under the hood and how to use it. We recognize that it's going to be a little bit of a arduous process, but we got to pull the Band-Aid off at some point. So we're going to jump in and use it. We're not taking FOM down right now, but we do have everything fully featured and built on Quorum for our facility.
I guess that is something else to focus on too, that probably should have been at the beginning, at the outset. You won't receive a bill via QuickBooks for FY21 at this point. All billing for FY21 will be done in quorum, whether or not you made the reservation in quorum. So just to expand that a touch, what we're doing is if the reservations were made in July or August in FOM, we are taking that data and putting it into quorum to test and make sure the system works appropriately. Looking at both side by side, and if everything looks in quorum the same way it did in FOM, then we're doing the billing events via quorum, and that's what actually happened, I believe, the week before last with Mass Spec. So yeah, so even if FOM might be used for reservations moving forward, all billing from now on, FY21 moving forward, will be through quorum.
Okay, I guess that's it. That was a ton of information. Thank you everyone for coming to today's seminar. Throughout these series, we're going to be featuring individual core facilities and their relevant technologies. Our next seminar is scheduled for Tuesday, September 22nd, in which we'll hear from Amy Burnside on how the imaging capabilities using our micro CT and IVUS imaging systems can help in your research. So save the date and we hope to see you there. Goodbye, everybody.